Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Polymer Expert Talk. My name is Tervik, and today's guest is Dr. Julian Lotz, founder of the company BIOVOX. Hello, and welcome, Julian.
Yeah, hi, Hervik, and thank you for having me here. Great pleasure, and good to talk to the bioplastics or the plastics community here. It's actually not a bioplastics community like with us.
Yeah, it will be an exciting talk, and I'm really looking forward. Let us start with a introduction of yourself, your role at the company, and also how BIOVOX was founded, and give us there some details, please.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a mechanical engineer coming from the field of fiber reinforced plastics and product development. So more like the high-tech and lightweight construction part of plastics. But then in the end, I made a switch towards more sustainable plastics in the thermoplastics field. My current role in BIOVOX, I'm one of the co-founders together with Carmen and Vincent. We founded the company in 2021. And we originally started with bone replacement materials, so resorbable bioplastics for implants. That's where Vincent did his research in also. But we then saw that the market for resorbable implant materials is, let's say, not that big. And on the other hand, it's extremely difficult and lengthy and costly to develop those osteosynthesis materials. But we saw that in hospitals, there is a lot of waste of resources. We have a lot of plastic single-use items and packaging, and for good reasons, of course. But still, the use of resources and the climate impact is really, really huge and relevant. And that's why we made the switch and said, hey, let's take this knowledge that we have about biocompatibility, risk management, and medical devices, and try to start make the plastics better that we have in large quantities there.
And you are located in Germany. Where exactly is your headquarters?
We are in Darmstadt, so right south of Frankfurt, quite central.
Okay, great. And so you mentioned already bioplastics. So how you define this term bioplastics, and also then in relation to medical grade plastics and applications, how you see this? Because there are lots of definitions, and it will be interesting for our community to hear how you define such a term.
Yeah, we usually stick to the relatively widely known matrix of bio-based and biodegradable categories. The biodegradable category or the biodegradability is not that relevant in the medical field, as we don't compost materials, and usually it's also not really sustainable or good as an end-of-life solution, except for some specific products maybe. So for us, the main point in there is having bio-based content in the materials, getting away from fossil resources and use more renewable resources there.
It's a good definition. And when we look now at your portfolio, you have this specialization on bioplastics for medical application, and you call it Med Eco, what I read. Can you explain to us which biopolymers are you using there, and how this portfolio is set up for to get a better feeling what is behind there?
The Med Eco plastics, I mean, that's a brand name, as you pointed out. So behind them, there are different polymers in general. We started mostly with PLA-based compounds and also neat polymers, because we saw that PLA is quite interesting for single-use items. The restrictions that PLA has are not that relevant for those types of products usually. And on the other hand, it has some unique benefits like high transparency, high stiffness and strength that you really can utilize in several products in the medical field, having better performance or using less material. But of course, we are expanding that. Our approach is to be able to supply a variety of material properties. So we currently are working on bio-based polyethylenes as the next part of the Med Eco family coming end of the year, to have more soft materials for, let's say, hoses or soft packaging, back packaging, or softer injection molded parts. And in the future, there will also be high barrier materials for pharma packaging, for example. We are working on quite a variety, or also PHAs and PHBs for the longer term future. So there will be more. Currently, most of it is PLA-based, but the idea is to have a family of medical grade plastics that are made for different characteristic profiles for applications in the healthcare field, being polymer agnostic there.
And when we look at your PLA grades, so there are neat resins, but also reinforced with glass fibers, for example, or is it so that you can make more for injection molding for more mechanical parts, or
it's not that much reinforced with glass fibers so far. There are a few applications where that could be handy, but currently it's mostly
so it's not
modified in terms of the production processes, so that it's easier to manufacture, for example, faster cycle times or better demolding, or that we have mineral filled variants if you need more density or another feeling of the surface or more stiffness. So this is the range, basically.
So based on the requirement of your customers, you can really make here the compounds out of this PLA. Interesting. And you mentioned already some applications. Can we deepen 1-2 applications where your MedEco grades are or can be used, for example, that we get the feeling?
Sure. We are in a wide range of applications, actually. What we saw that came in a lot is, of course, IVDs as disposables. We have several customers from the endoscopic and microinvasive surgery field, so different surgical devices, endoscopic devices or parts of them. Packaging is important, so sterile barrier packaging like thermoformed heart blisters, for example. It's a nice not exactly drop-in, but close to drop-in to PETG films. So that's what we have currently. Some lab products.
That's already really 4 or 5 applications. What I counted now. So it's really already broad range. It's interesting.
It's basically stiffer single-use parts or packaging currently with the PLAs, as it's a very stiff material. Also some trays for pharma packaging, secondary packaging. We will see a shift, I think, towards also softer parts coming up with the BioPE, of course.
With the BioPE, it's a great approach, and a topic which is really discussed almost in every exchange with people is the topic of the carbon footprint of products, product carbon footprint, the life cycle analysis of plastics. And I mean, when we look at commodity polymers versus high performance polymers like a polyether ketone, high performance polymers, they have a higher product carbon footprint because chemically it cannot be, it has more carbon, it has more process step in comparison to polypropylene where you have carbon and the hydrogen. And when we look now at your MedEco products and compare them to polypropylene, for example, or ABS, how they are doing with the CO2 footprint? Where are we standing?
Yep. Of course, first you have to differentiate a little bit between the scopes that you're looking at. Is it cradle to gate? So basically just the carbon footprint for the finished resin, but not really for the product, including end of life? Or are you looking at the whole life cycle? If we are looking at cradle to gate, so just the pellets themselves, then you are very high in terms of the carbon footprint reduction, as you usually get some benefit from having carbon from the atmosphere in the material. You get there a bonus. If you are looking at the whole life cycle, which is more important from our perspective, as that is what determines the climate impact, then we usually are better around 50 to 85% currently, depending on the polymers that we are comparing to. PE or PP, for example, they are very efficiently manufactured also from fossil resources.
They are already really exact.
So there it's more like 50% or something like that. If you're looking at a ABS or PC ABS, for example, then you get closer towards 70, 80, sometimes over 80%. But that also depends on the product. For example, if you are having a polypropylene part and you can replace it with a PLA-based compound, and use that you have 1.5 times the strength and stiffness and reduce the material by half or 40% or something, then you can really save a lot also compared to polyolefins. But that's not possible for every application. And if we talk about drop-in solutions, bio-PE, dropping in for a fossil PE, then it will also be more like the 50% range.
It's really impressive. So it's really a big part, and it's a good point when you say cradle to gate life cycle. And it's also the data you use. Do I use primary data, so my own production data, or do I use secondary data, which are publicly available over database? And there you have again a delta also. So it's really it's not yet for what I think it's really important that also in the discussion that we compare according the same standard and not different databases, because they really have different values okay. And we already mentioned it a bit, the term life cycle analysis. So it jumps towards also circular economy.
Yep.
And do you see here also with your products good chances to as an enabler also for this in the medical field, for example? How you
Yeah, absolutely. The first and easiest part getting towards more circularity is in the current end of life of most medical products in Europe, at least, that's incineration. And if you see that you have a bio-based material and you incinerate the material, then of course you're releasing carbon, but the carbon is in a carbon circle that's one growth period, so basically 1 year. And it's a large circular economy, but it already is circular, as you don't have the carbon emissions long-term in the atmosphere. So even with the end-of-life options that we see today in the medical sector, we are somewhat circular. Of course, recycling on the material level, reuse, remanufacturing, etc., is the target and has to be, because it's of course way more efficient than incinerating the material. But they're also, depending on the materials, you get new unique possibilities. For example, with polyesters, and that's not only the bio-based PLA or PEF, for example, but also PET. You can do chemical recycling quite efficiently, and there you have the option to get back into medical applications again with a chemically recycled material with roughly half of the carbon footprint. And this is something that will increase a bit more with bioplastics, I think, because in nature we find esters, polyesters quite more often than polyolefins, for example. We can do polyolefins from bio-based materials, but polyesters might also be a chance there for circular economy in highly regulated sectors.
Because what I noticed, big medical companies, they start like taking back their insulin pens and then downcycle them. They make chairs or mold chairs, and you can. So it's, but your approach and to really go back into medical applications, this is really the best way forward.
Yeah, on that it depends a bit. Because actually, if you are using polyolefins, for example, downcycling might be very, very good from a sustainability point of view, as there are large markets for recycling material of polyolefins, and the chemical recycling would be very inefficient comparably. So there it might be better to downcycle it, while it would be better to recycle it same level, for example, with other materials like some polyesters. It's always a case-by-case decision that you have to do there.
It's also the topic with high performance polymers, where chemical recycling is also hard. It takes lots of energy because we use them in high heat applications because they are so stable, and so they're the mass balance approach that you say, okay, I start before the monomer to source really there, and then I have my benzene, and from that on I make my monomers and then the polymers. So I have the same properties again, but I have I start with this mass balance approach. So this is also a way we see, and a topic which regularly also comes into the discussion with bioplastics is yes, I want to use them, but they are in competition with the food chain, and so it's by the end it's not that bio. How you see that? How you handle this with your products? This discussion point.
Yep. From my perspective, it's always coming down to the relations that we have there, the proportions. How much land do we use for food production? How much land do we use for materials? It's not only plastics, of course. For example, cotton production takes up quite some land area. It's more than bioplastics, and there are, for example, scientific life cycle analysis that show that it would be more efficient to use bioplastic fibers instead of cotton, because then you have less land use, because cotton doesn't bring that much t-shirts per hectare compared to sugarcane for plastics, for example. So there is optimization potential. In general, we calculated, or the IFBB calculated, and we reiterated on that, that you could do all of the 390 million tons of plastic per year in the world with around 15%, it's 14 point something percent of the currently used farmland. And if we increase the degree of circularity, do more recycling, then we can get that down to, in the best case, around 3%. And that's not really endangering the food production. On the other hand, of course, we are using around 60, 70, 80%, depending on where you look at, for feeding animals instead of eating the plants directly. That's also, for example, a topic, or energy plants for fuels that we then just incinerate. So there is optimization potential, and it's not that we need additional agricultural area or food waste, of course, also with 25%. That would also be enough to grow all of the plastics that we need.
It's a really good point. Thank you for sharing these insights. This was, because this, I think, in all over populations is not so clear, because they always bring up this, but also this cotton for the t-shirts. It's a good point. And and when we look now at bioplastics, and I want to use them, and can you give us some recommendations for material selection and also for regulation, especially for this medical field? So that the fear, because sometimes the people fear that, bioplastics, I don't know how to, especially in this regulatory field of medical applications. So what are your best tips to start here and to get into some applications?
Yep. I think the most important thing is to be a bit open, so that you can choose from different polymers. So if you come with, let's say, a data sheet of a ABS and say, hey, I need exactly this material with that properties, then it gets difficult, because then it's basically coming down to exactly that ABS that you currently use. If you are open and say, hey, I want that and this and that functionality, I need these properties in the material roughly, how could we go there with different options? Then we often find, for example, a softer variant that's maybe a bit cheaper, a more high performancy variant where you use less material, but it costs a little more. And then you have to find the break even, what's the best solution overall. Also taking into account which type of sterilization method do you use, because that's affecting material properties, recyclability, often neglected. And also the end of life. Is it a take-back system? Does it get incinerated? Whatever. And with that, it's a multifactorial approach. But if we are going through all of the life cycle, requirements-wise, and also in terms of the ecological footprint, then you can make an informed decision. And having a bit leg room for selection is always good. So not being too focused on really exact and specific material properties, because usually you don't need them. It's more like a general characteristic that you would need.
Well, it's really a good point also to be open, racing agnostic, because it's sometimes really, we always use this ABS, and please just give, and it's really then our job to really ask, do we need really all these properties? And so it's really okay to be more open in this and seek the discussion. Great. I totally agree here. And if people want to reach out to you and BioVox, what is the best way to approach you, to find you, where you can?
Yeah. I mean, easiest would be the website, I think, biovox.systems. There we also have the BioWiki, where you can find a lot of information, articles also on the topics like food
Great, yeah.
competition. There's much more deep dive than we had now here. So if you need more information on topic in general, there is some. You can also find always some buttons all over the website to just book an appointment with me via Calendly, so we can have a chat.
This is great, and exactly because I will link your homepage, because you have also this great CO2 calculator and so on. So it's really nice tools what you have also on your website. Okay, great.
Yeah, happy to hear.
Good. Thank you very much, Julian, for this great exchange. Was really fun. Thank you everyone for watching. And if you like what our discussion today, give us a thumb up. And I would like to thank you again, Julian, and thank you everyone for watching, and see you the next time. Bye.
Bye.